You can't be 10. But super excited today with this workshop. It's the Cash Flow Survival Kit with Logan Burchett. He is the co-founder and chief operating officer at Forecastr. He has an extensive career in finance. Logan, I'll let you jump right in and we'll get this workshop going. Super excited.
Awesome. Really appreciate it. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I just, you guys can see everything. Okay, cool. Hey, I don't ever use Google Meet, by the way. So it's actually really cool that I can share my screen and I can see exactly what you guys are seeing. And Zoom doesn't work that way. So, but cool, guys. Well, really appreciate you guys letting me talk to you this afternoon about cash flow survival. This is going to be kind of an amalgamation of topics. Like whenever Tyga asked to do a workshop, I was kind of thinking through, well, what could be the most impactful and what's the best way to kind of package what I'm going to be talking about today. So we decided to go with the angle of cash flow survival, but that's going to encompass so much more. We're going to talk about financial modeling. We're going to talk about how to construct financial models and how to use them to impress investors whenever you're fundraising. It's kind of this big and like somewhat nebulous topic of venture finance. So we're going to try to wrap as much of that into today's session as we possibly can. I did want to start with this. I know I recognize that the date's a little further back, but I didn't change it just because it's still true today. Where the reason that this is important, if you want to just go into Google and Google what is the most likely thing to kill your company, what's the number one killer of companies, pretty much any source that you find is going to cite poor cash flow management, which is such a shame because it's one of the most avoidable ways to survive, like to not run out of gas, to not die, right? I mean, this is a preventable problem. This is something that, with the proper scrutiny, with the proper processes, things like that, you can absolutely avoid this. You can absolutely see several months and sometimes years into the future to understand when are you likely to run out of cash, and then you're going to put all of the processes, procedures in place to make sure that that doesn't actually happen. So that's really what we're going to be focusing on today. But there's a cost to it, and there's something that you actually really must embrace in order to get the most value out of today's content. The core belief that you have to have about finance and cash flow management. And that core belief is that this is a integral part of your job as a founder and especially as a CEO. Okay. And I say that and I always lead with this because in my experience, I've been doing this for about a decade now. Founders, especially in the earlier stages, tend to write off finance as something that's not important. They think that it's maybe something that they need to do whenever they're prepping for a fundraise. They need to put a financial model together, or they need to find the cheapest accountant that they can possibly find on Upwork just to get by and scrape some reports together. But you need to understand to get the most out of today's content that finance is one of your core jobs, your responsibilities as a founder. And so I went through Techstars back in 2020, and there's this really, he's like a locally, Techstars local famous guy named Dave Mandel. And he gave this talk that was called The Three Jobs of a CEO. It's one of his most famous talks through Techstars. And he says that there's three jobs of a CEO in addition to all the other work they have to do, which is number one, set and communicate vision. Number two, hire the right people. So make sure you have the right people on the bus. And then number three is don't run out of cash, right? So this is so important that all of Techstars tells their founders that this is one of the top three jobs of a founder. And that's going to come with work. That's going to come with responsibility. And all of that's okay. All of that's expected. But what's not okay is to shrug this off your shoulders and say this stuff isn't important. This is, in fact, one of the most important things that you could focus on as a founder, as a CEO. So that's just setting the stage for everything that we're going to be talking about for the rest of the presentation. So I always like to start at the ground floor whenever it comes to finance, financial planning and analysis, cash flow management, all of this stuff. I think it's really helpful to start at base zero and assume that we know nothing so we can build all of today's content off of the same sturdy base, right? So let's start with that. What actually is a financial model? This term that you've no doubt heard a million times. What is it, right? I talk to a lot of founders. There seems to be a lot of misinformation as to what this actually is and the value of a financial model. So let's talk about that first. I'm going to use an analogy just because that's fun to talk about financial modeling and try to explain the value of a financial model. So I'm going to take us all the way back to like the 1950s. I don't know when these pictures were taken. Early on, whenever cars were built in a much different way, whenever you're looking at the design phase of the car manufacturing process, let's say you're back in the 40s, you want to make a new car. You got this idea for this new innovation of an automobile. You're super excited about it. You want to build it. All right. How does that process go? Well, back in those days, it would start with a pen and paper. Right. So you would sketch out a schematic of what this new wonderful car is ultimately going to look like. That's going to give you a sense of weight distribution. It'll help you understand kind of what that's ultimately going to look like. Then you're going to do what this guy on the screen's doing. You can see he's got this like big chunk of clay and he's got like a scalpel and he's like carving out what this car is going to look like. And this gives him a little bit more data. Now he can actually weigh the car to understand what the weight distribution is. He knows more about the aerodynamics and whatever else is important. I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but it gives him more information, right, about the car. Once he's gone through that process, then he's going to do the work of actually constructing a working prototype. So he's going to build a car with a real engine with steel rubber that can actually be tested on a track. And then he's going to do just that. He's going to take that brand new car, he's going to put it on a track, and he's going to run it through a series of tests. Him and his team are. And they're going to run it through all kinds of different variants and conditions. They're going to run it on a wet track, a dry track, extreme heat, extreme cold. What happens when you take a super sharp turn? What happens when there's gravel? What happens when there's sand on the track? All of these things, they're going to test this car under all of these different conditions. Now, the point of this is to figure out failure points. They're literally trying to break the car. That's what they're trying to do. That's what you do during testing is you're trying to see where does this car fall apart so that we can address those safety issues. We can address all of that before we go and take this to mass production and try to sell it to millions and millions of people. And whenever you go looking for ways to break the car, you're going to find ways to break the car, right? This almost always surfaces errors. This is the point of the process that then need to be addressed. And sometimes these are minor things. A lot of times these are very, very severe things. So think about how dangerous this is. I am in a car driving very fast that has never been driven before, and I'm trying to break the car that I'm driving. Right? That terrifies me. It's very, very dangerous. And not only is it dangerous, it takes a long time because if there's a major error, you got to go all the way back to the front of the drawing board and start that whole thing again. And it's super expensive because it takes a lot of in-person time, an individual's time to do this. And then those iterations can span years and years and years before you can get a car to market. So super inefficient. Luckily, we have come a long way since those days because now we use software for the entirety of this process. It's called CAD, where we can, once we have an idea for a car, we can build this car virtually using this software, right? And I can, same deal, whenever I have it built virtually, I now understand weight distribution, aerodynamics, all of the stuff that I used to have to do by hand and by scalpel, I can now understand via software. But what's even better is I can take this virtual car, I can put it on a virtual track, and I can do that same testing virtually. But instead of taking months and years and it being super dangerous and expensive, it now takes seconds and it is as safe as can be, right? And it's only after we do this software testing, which eliminates, by the way, 99.9% of the foreseeable errors, that we then move into physical real world testing. At this point, again, you've eliminated most of the causes for failure and you're testing a much, much safer product. So, only reason I tell you this story is because we believe that this is the perfect analogy for a financial model. Because what a financial model ultimately is a mathematical simulation of your business. You are simulating your business with math. And whenever that business is simulated, you can take that business on a test drive. You can understand what it looks like if you were to raise prices and you could see a corresponding decrease in conversion rates. You could see what would happen if you decrease churn by implementing a customer success campaign and you offset that with a customer success team cost, right? You can understand what it looks like to expand into larger markets or to hire a sales team or whatever it is, raise money, raise debt, whatever it is. Once you have this simulation of your business met, you can take it on as many test drives as you want And just like it did for the automobile industry, this is going to eliminate the vast majority of your potential causes of failure, the potential failure points you'll be able to see way down the road before you even run the experiment. Then, once you get that clarity, then you can decide whether or not to execute or not on that strategy. So, this is why we're so passionate about financial modeling. This is why we're so passionate about financial planning and analysis. It's not just accounting, it's not just record keeping, right? It is actual proactive decision making, it is strategic thinking, and it will help you build a better business if you do it right. It's just that so many people do it wrong. All right. So that's what a financial model is. So now I'm going to take us one layer deeper. That was very abstract. That was very high level mathematical simulation of your business. So let's go one layer deeper. And let's say, okay, well, that's cool. But practically speaking, in the real world, why do we build financial models for businesses? And there are two main reasons. You can kind of break things down into two main overarching camps. The first one is that it's going to help you impress investors. Okay. So let's unpack that one for a second. So we all know about pitch decks. Whenever we go to pitch an investor, every one of us probably has a million different versions of the pitch deck that we've worked on a million different times. The pitch deck is highly visual, and the job of the pitch deck is to help you tell your story, right? It's to help you pitch your business. It is an aid to you pitching your business. Just like the pitch deck is an aid to pitching your business, the financial model is also an aid to pitching your business, but there's a very important difference. The pitch deck helps you pitch your business in a highly visual format. It relies on pictures, graphs, things that aid in your story that are visual. The financial model is highly mathematical. It aids your story with metrics and numbers and formulas, right? They're both helping you tell your story, and they should both support the same story. But one is very visual and one is very mathematical. So, why is this important? Because if you look at the average investor, the average venture capitalist, let's say, and you analyze the background, this is a bit of, I'm being a bit of like doing a little bit of a, generalizing here, but I think you can still do this. Most of them come with a background that's tilted more towards metrics and finance. Most of them come from investment banking backgrounds. A lot of them will come from private equity backgrounds. A lot of them were founders themselves, so they have experience doing forecasting, these types of things. They tend to be very comfortable in metrics and numbers just because that's kind of how businesses run once you get past a certain level of maturity. And so, because this is how they think, this is the language that they speak, you are going to stand out much more if you can pitch to them in their language, right? I always say, like, if I were to go to France and pitch a VC, if I could, ideally, I would speak French because I'm speaking their language. It's more comfortable for them. So, this is the same thing. If I can pitch to them using their language, it's going to hit much harder for them, especially when you consider the fact that finance and financial modeling, it's a fairly specialized area of business, and it tends to overwhelm and scare off a lot of founders. So if you're able to meet those investors toe to toe and pitch them on your business in their native language and do it better than every other founder can, you are going to stand out from the pack. And that is the job of fundraising, by the way. It's not to blend in and see what you can get by with. It is to stand out. It is to be the top 1% of companies that are out there pitching investors. That's your job. And so this is just one of those ways that you can do that. It's one of those additional ways that you can stand out. It's going to help you impress investors, right? It's going to help show them that you're going to be a good fiduciary of their money. It's also going to help you make better decisions, right? And we're going to get into this one a lot more. I'm actually going to run us through a demonstration that kind of shows you how you can use a financial model to figure out where to focus in your business. But for now, suffice it to say that you can ask that simulation a bunch of different questions, a bunch of important questions that are going to help you run your business. That simulation is going to help you do just that. It's going to help you answer those questions. So we're going to come back to that one here in just a minute.
And hey, Logan, too, quick question too, because I know we've had some questions that people submitted that weren't able to make it just yet. And so maybe it's on this slide or eventually coming up is like, with the financial model and planning runway and just financial metrics in general, obviously super important when you look at kind of the runway with bootstrap companies and VC back, but also how does this, I guess you don't have to answer this exact second, but like when it applies to also those building consultancies, agencies, or also service-based businesses? How does this apply, or is it differentiated as much between those types of segments?
It's a really good question, Brian. I actually don't directly answer that in the presentation, but so I'll answer it right now, which is that every business should do some level of FP&A, financial planning and analysis, which includes accounting, which is the past of finance, and forecasting, which is the future of finance. It doesn't matter if you're the pizza shop down the road or if you're a venture-backed company that's raised $250 million. It doesn't matter. How those things will look will be very different, but the act of planning cash flow, the act of doing cash planning should be practiced by every business. Again, running out of cash is the number one killer of companies. And that doesn't matter if you're an SMB or if you're a venture-backed startup. Running out of cash is the number one killer of all businesses. So what we're talking about today is an insurance policy that is going to protect you against the number one most likely thing that will kill your business. So it should be done by everybody. If you're a consultancy business, for example, we're going to get into revenue formulas and things like that here in a little bit. But even if it's basic, this is how much cash I expect to come in the next couple of months. This is generally how much I'm going to be spending in the next couple of months. So X minus Y, this is an approximate value of what my cash is going to be. Even that basic level of forecasting is gonna put you on a much better track than if you don't do anything at all. And then I'll leave it with this, Brian, which is, again, I've been in this space for 10 years. I can't tell you how many times I have had companies that have come to me. They've found me through one way or another, and they say, "Look, Logan, I really need you to help me because I just found out that I have 2 months of runway left. I'm going to be out of cash in 2 months." My pushback there is, if you only have 1 to 2 months of runway left, and if you have a high burn rate, it's gonna be hard to save that company. Like, you're gonna have to that company's gonna look very different. You're either gonna have to do a triage fundraise, which never works out very well, or you're gonna have to lay off a lot of people. Something's gonna have to change. But the point is, why didn't you see this 6 months ago? Why are you not looking at this every month? Why do you not see where you're going to run out of cash and you look at that number every month? That's really what I'm talking about here. And that's going to be the same if you're a pizza joint or if you're a venture backed company. Just looking at your bank account, doing an approximated forecasted balance and making necessary preparations. That's what needs to be done for every business. Does that answer your question? Cool. Perfect.
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you, man.
So how does that look? So this is actually a good segue because, okay, so we've talked about the general, what is a financial model, kind of nebulous simulation of your business. I'm going to layer deeper and talked about the two tangible points of value, the impressing investors, helping you make better decisions. But now I want to talk about what is the actual output of a financial model. So it's like, what are the things that the financial model actually produces that helps us analyze and make these types of decisions? So one important distinction is that you have financial models and then you have financial projections. And a lot of people lump those two things into the same category. They think they're the same thing, but there actually is a subtle but very important difference, which is a financial model is the engine that can produce an infinite amount of financial projections. So it is like, if you're using Forecastr, it is the Forecastr platform. If you're using Excel, it is the Excel sheet that can produce these financial projections. You can have one financial model that produces best case projections, middle of the road projections, worst case projections if we hit, an economic slowdown or something like that. So that's an important distinction to know, is that you can have one financial model, but those financial projections you can have an infinite amount of. You can literally make as many as you want from them just by adjusting the inputs. So financial projections come in the form of the three big financial statements, which you can see here on the screen: the income statement, the balance sheet, and the statement of cash flows. Now, back to your question, Brian, every business has this, right? It doesn't matter what kind of business you are, you have these three statements. Microsoft has them, and your local library has them, right? An income statement, a balance sheet, a statement of cash flows. This is just the language of finance. This is how we talk about finance, and it's how finance has been expressed for the past several hundred years. Anybody that uses QuickBooks or Xero or any accounting system out there, if you go to the reporting section of those softwares, you are going to see these three reports because they are the language of finance. They are the reports that finance categorizes themselves in. because this is how we establish the past of finance historically with accounting, we must then forecast in the exact same language, in the exact same way. So we must also forecast an income statement, a balance sheet, and a statement of cash flows. Because the way that FP&A works is that you have historical data, stuff that's already happened, you have future data, stuff that hasn't happened yet, and it's your job to analyze where they meet in the middle. Once a then you have to go back and say, okay, what did we think was going to happen this month? And then what actually happened this month? Where are the differences and what did we learn? Right. That's kind of the heart and soul of FP&A. So you must therefore maintain the same reports in the financial model as you do in your accounting software. I'm not going to go super deep on these. I'll just give you a quick 30-second overview of what each of these statements mean. There are MBA courses, entire majors on these three statements. But just to keep it high level and simple, your income statement is the statement that has revenue and expenses and net income. It generally tells you how much money you're making, how much money you're spending, and whether or not you're profitable, right? It's probably the most heavily scrutinized statement by investors on this list, mainly because it tells you important things like how quickly is revenue growing, what is your gross margin, so kind of like how profitable are you on the unit, and then are you making or losing money. So that's the income statement. Balance sheet is going to be a ledger of everything that your company owns or owes other people. So it's just kind of like what does this company have? What does it own? So this is where you're going to see things like cash balances. It's where you're going to see things like accounts receivable, which is the money other people owe you. It's also going to be where you see your credit card liabilities, right? It's going to show if you have any debt, how much debt do I owe other people? And if you've raised money, it's going to show how much money you've raised. So it's just kind of a ledger of what you owe other people, what other people owe you, and what the business generally owns and what it has, right? Then you have the statement of cash flows, which its whole job, as the name implies, is to tell the story of what happens to cash, right? Anybody that spent any time in business knows that cash is kind of a nuanced thing. You might even say that you're profitable on the income statement, but be losing money every single month. And that could be there could be a number of different reasons why that could be. Maybe you've got a lot of debt and you have a big debt payment that's not showing up on the income statement. That's important for investors to know about. That's important for you to know about and to factor in whenever it comes to forecasting, right? There's a bunch of different reasons why that may be the case. So I'll suffice it to say the statement of cash flows, it's got one job, and that is to tell the true story of what is happening to cash every single month. With these three statements, with just these three statements, if you have a forecast that encompasses these three statements, you will be in very, very good shape to make sure that you don't die from running out of cash. The number one killer of companies, again, I'll keep saying it, is running out of cash. You forecast these three statements, you look at them every month. That all but guarantees that you're not going to run out of cash without knowing about it, or without you seeing it well in advance. Cool. Okay. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper than that. So those are the three statements that you're going to be forecasting with your financial model. But there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces to a financial model. If anybody here is like dug into that world, you know that there's a lot to build whenever you first build a financial model. Of course, it gets refined over time, but a lot of founders will ask me, okay, where do I need to focus? What's the number one most important thing that I need to focus on whenever I build my financial model? And the answer is quite simple. It's revenue, right? We all probably could have guessed it. Revenue is the number one place that you want to focus on whenever you're building your financial model. Well, the reason for that is it's very difficult to predict whenever you're in the early stages. Like, I mean, if you're IBM, you can just grow revenue 3% year over year, and you're probably going to be about right. But if you're an early stage startup, that's not going to cut it. It's very, very difficult to predict. It's also really difficult to control in the early stages. Again, if you're IBM, you've got it all figured out. It's down to a science. But if you're in the early stages, I mean, it's all over the place while you're trying to figure things out. So it's very difficult to control. It's also why most companies end up failing is they just simply don't generate revenue fast enough. You can absolutely still fail as a company and you can run out of cash if you're growing revenue very quickly. But if you're growing really quickly, then you're probably going to get somebody that wants to invest in your company to save you from running out of cash. So it's one of the biggest reasons that most companies end up failing. Another side note on this, I think this is really important to anybody that's considering finance for their companies, is that If you're looking at stocks, so if you want to go out and you want to buy a stock right now and you want to understand generally what that company is worth, there are teams of analysts on Wall Street that their job is to value what each individual company is worth. And the methods that they use to do that simply don't work on startups because the primary one is called a DCF, which is a discounted cash flow. That's a way that they can discount all the future cash payments using a discount rate into today's terms, and that gives you an approximate value for that company. And this is how Wall Street values companies. This is generally how mature companies are valued. But there's a problem with that with startups, which is that most of us lose money every month. We're not generating money every month. So how are you going to value a company based off of the full future cash flows of that company when your future cash flows are negative, right? Whenever you're generating negative cash flow, you can't do that, right? It doesn't make sense. Mathematically, it doesn't. And so to account for this, we have done something different with startups. We have a approximated way that we can value a company that doesn't rely on that company being profitable. This is called a market approach, a revenue multiple approach, where you can generally take revenue and you can multiply it by whatever multiple you want to use. That's different for SaaS companies than it is for e-commerce companies than it is for consulting companies. And that'll give you a general approximated value of the company. So whenever you look at it that way, revenue in the early stages is largely going to determine the value of your company, right? While you're in that venture phase. So revenue is really, really, really important, especially early on. It's even more important than profitability, which in Wall Street terms is weird, but in startup terms makes a ton of sense, right? So revenue is important. So now I want to get into what's known as a revenue formula. All right, there's a lot going on the screen. I probably should have warned you before I flipped it, just because there's a bunch of stuff happening, but I'm going to walk you through what this means. So first of all, what a revenue formula is, it is the process of deconstructing exactly how you generate revenue for your company. And you want to be very specific, right? So through all the years that I've been doing finance, for all the years that I've been a fractional CFO, I've seen the overwhelming majority of companies, whenever they put a forecast together, they'll do something like, well, we generated $15,000 of revenue last month. We're just going to assume that we grow 3% month over month. And that's going to be how we're going to grow revenue. That's our revenue forecast. The problem with that is it doesn't really tell you anything and it doesn't give you any insights onto how you can impact that growth and how you can actually grow your business. It also, from an investor standpoint, is really lazy and literally tells you nothing. Because if I drag 3% compounded out for 60 months, starting from any base whatsoever, you're going to hit an astronomically big number. That's just exponential growth. That's just how math works. So instead of doing that, you instead want to deconstruct how you're going to be achieving that growth, not just have that be your forecast in its entirety. So I'm going to walk you through this, which is just a plain Jane monthly subscription business. So think about Spotify, Netflix, Hulu, any of the million subscriptions that we all probably have. That's generally what this revenue formula is meant to represent. So if we start at the highest level, we could say, okay, revenue at the highest level is just price times subscriptions, right? I have a certain amount of people paying me a certain amount every month. I multiply those two numbers together. That is my revenue. But that's it at its highest level. Our job with the revenue formula is to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper until you can't dig any deeper. So this is where we introduce the concept of formulas, and here we call them metrics, versus inputs. An input is something you can't go any deeper. You set it yourself, right? That is a metric that is kind of like the bedrock of your business. But the green boxes, the green bubbles, these are things that you can actually dig deeper into. So in this case, monthly price, there's nothing to dig deeper into. We set the price. We figure out what the price is. That's an input, right? So there you go. Done with that one. What about my subscribers? I can go way deeper on subscribers. How do I actually grow subscribers over time? Okay, so let's go a layer deeper. So my subscribers at any point in time is however many I had last month, minus any that left me. So any of them that lost, churned subscribers, plus any new subscribers that I get. Right? Makes sense. So I had some amount, some of them left, and then I got some new ones. Now I have this new amount. That's what it's trying to tell me. All right. So we can go deeper on all of those. So let's look at the lost subscribers. So if I look at my subscribers that I lose every month, it's the same subscribers that I had at the beginning of the month multiplied by my monthly churn rate. right? This is a very important SaaS metric. It's really important for anything that's a subscription metric, which is the percentage of customers that leave me every month, right? This is going to be one of those bedrock metrics. This is going to be one of those input metrics. You can't really go much deeper from a metric perspective into churn. You can't break that one down any further. So we're going to make that one an input. You can influence it, which is also very important. Any of the purple metrics, while you can't dig deeper into them, you can make them a priority and influence them. So for churn rate, I could implement a new customer success campaign. I can put in, notifications in the app, whatever it is to get them coming back, that type of thing. So now let's go into new customers. How am I getting new subscribers? Well, this is where we can break it down into a bunch of different strategies. So in this case, I could say, well, I get new subscribers from maybe paid Google search. Maybe I get new subscribers from email marketing and some Facebook marketing that we do, right? So I can break each of those down individually. Right now, I'm just going to do one for time's sake and say, let's look at paid Google. I get paid Google customers from my traffic from Google multiplied by my conversion rate, right? So my conversion rate's another bedrock metric. I can influence it, but there's nothing else I can do to get that up. My traffic from Google is something I can dig in a little bit deeper into by looking at my monthly budget divided by my cost per click. These are both bedrock metrics. The cost per click is set by the market. My monthly budget is set by me, right? So I can influence that. So I'm going to take us about 10 steps back before we move on from this slide. And I think this really shows the power of the revenue formula because there's only 5 purple buckets or 5 purple bubbles on this slide that are inputs. So to put that differently, if I want to grow revenue, there's only 5 things that I can focus on this slide that's going to lead to revenue growth. I could increase my prices, my monthly prices. I could focus on churn and get churn rate down. I could try to increase conversion rates on some of my marketing efforts. I could spend more on marketing, or I could maybe try to find cheaper keywords if that's an option, right? So our job and what financial modeling FP&A will help you with is understand all of these things that I could focus on. What's going to give me the biggest bang for my buck? What's going to help me grow my company the most efficiently, right? And this is the power of FP&A. This is the power of the revenue formula. And we're going to dig into that with an example right now. I told you I'd come back to this. So this is an example. I did not make up the name of this company, by the way. Dollar Cave Club. Is Dollar Shave Club still around? I don't even know if it is, but if you guys remember Dollar Shave Club, it was a big thing. I think it maybe still is. But this is a play on that, Dollar Cave Club. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 30-second break from talking. I'm going to let you guys read this for 30 seconds. I'm going to jump into their financial model. 30 seconds on the clock. Go. Okay. My watch says, or my phone says 30 seconds is up, so we can get into Dollar Cave Club's financial model. So we built this financial model in Forecastr. You can do all of this without being a Forecastr customer. Everything that I'm about to show you, you can absolutely do in Excel. And I'll actually send you guys some templates in the chat here in a second that you can do this on your own, should you choose to do that. But we use Forecastr because it's awesome and because we built it. So can you guys see, are you guys seeing slides right now or a financial model?
We see Dollar Cave Club.
Okay, you see the same thing. Let me do this then. I'm going to unshare. And I'm going to reshare this. Okay, cool. Now you're seeing the right thing. So this is Dollar Cave Club's financial model. Just to walk you through, I'm not going to go through everything. I'm going to get this out of here real quick. Okay, so I'm not going to walk through how everything is built in here just because that's going to take too much time, but I'm going to hit the highlights, which is that this is going to show us an estimated valuation. This is using that, revenue multiple approach that we've got here. It shows how that valuation is going to change over time. And you can see that we're starting here, in 2025, and we're going all the way out to like November of 2029. So we're going to be looking at valuation. We're also going to be looking at cash balance. So this is going to show us what we think the cash balance is going to be. We get like a negative or a low point of about 140,000, and we go up to about 421,000. Right. So this is kind of showing us some basic outputs of the financial model. And then we can go into what's actually driving this into our assumptions tab. And I can see, all right, this is all of the different ways that we're getting new customers. We get some from paid advertising, from organic growth, that type of thing. But I want to focus our attention on the primary revenue source, which is subscriptions. And I want to take this business on a quick test drive to see if there's anything that we can do to increase the likelihood of success of this company. So right now we're showing that we have a 4% monthly churn rate, and we're showing that we charge $29.99 per month. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change one of these inputs, and we're going to see how that affects the future of the business. Now, remember, I'm going to just real quick remind us the valuation at the end of the model was 13.45, and then the cash balance at the end of the model was 421. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and I'm going to say, okay, it's not $30 a month. What if we doubled price and we say it's $60 a month? I'm only changing that input right now. So we're just going to analyze that in isolation. In theory, if you doubled price, a bunch of other metrics would likely change. But right now, we're not going to worry about that. We're going to come back to that here in a second. And we're going to say, okay, if all we did was double price, what's going to happen? If I do that, again, cash was $400,000, $420, I think. A lot of people would expect that cash would double as well. If you double price, cash is just going to double. When in fact, no, it goes up significantly. We're at $3.49 million of cash. But if I can double my price and hold everything else the same, I mean, my cash balance at that point is like 7, 8x, 9x, from where it was originally. So that's because of the nature of we've increased our prices, but we haven't necessarily increased costs. And we don't just get that new cash once, we get it the entire time that this customer is a customer. So our lifetime for a customer is 25 months. So we get that extra $30 for every customer 25 times, not just once. And the aggregate effect of that is pretty massive. It's also going to skyrocket our valuation to $23 million if we can pull that off. But this probably isn't realistic. Everybody, whenever I give this presentation, they always, say that, well, that's great. A lot of things are probably going to change if you just double your price. And that's fair. And that should be a part of the analysis. So let's say that we've increased our price by a factor of double. What if we increase our churn rate by that same factor as well? And so we went from 4% to 8%. So now, yeah, I'm charging twice as much, but customers are also leaving twice as fast. So the question, if we're business owners, is, okay, is this a better outcome for us, right? Is this a better version of this business? We can go back to the dashboard to see. Well, in this case, yeah. I mean, we're at 1.12 million in cash. So our cash is kind of, I think, tripled roughly. It's roughly tripled from where it was originally. And our valuation is significantly high. It's a couple $1 million higher. It was 13.4. Now it's 15.4. So it's gone up by about $2 million. So if I own this business outright, then I now know, okay, I can add $2 million to the value of this company, and I can add almost $1 million to my cash balance by simply extracting more value out of my clients, even at the cost of churn, right? You can see my lifetime value is cut in half. People were around for 25 months. Now they're only around for 12.5, but I'm generating so much more revenue per client that the net effects are substantially higher for my business. So now if I'm the CEO of this company, I know where to focus, and I could run a test with that. I could say, for the next 6 months, we're going to charge double. We're going to increase our price by double, and we're going to monitor churn. And if churn is anything less than double, then we're going to be in much better shape, right? So we should pursue that. And I can even find the break-even point here, by the way. So I could say, okay, well, what if it's 12%, right? Instead of 8, what if it triples? Now I can see I'm much worse off. If it triples, my ending cash goes negative, and I can see that my valuation is tanked, right? So it's really cool, and it's really interesting to find out, okay, where is the break-even point? And so in this case, it probably is somewhere, around 10%. And this is around where my valuation is back to where it was before. So I know that if I double price, my churn rate can go from 4% up to 10%. So if it's anything less than 10%, I've got the green light to move forward with it. And this is how I can use math, use finance to proactively increase the value of my company and increase the likelihood of success. So it's super powerful stuff. I'm going to flip back to the slides for the last. Just got a couple more for you guys, and then we'll close it out for questions. Cool. Okay. So we've talked about what a financial model is. We've talked about what the output of a financial model is. I've even taken you into a real life financial model to kind of show you how it can work in practice. So I'm going to end things off by talking about how you can actually build a financial model for yourself, right? And I've got templates that's going to make this a lot easier. But generally, I think a lot of people do better whenever they have something like a step-by-step plan. So they kind of know where to start and how to go about this process of building a financial model. So step number one is just doing what we already did in this presentation, which is deconstruct your revenue formula. So you can even do this. You don't need Excel or Forecastr or anything like that to do that. You can just take a sheet of paper and a pen and just write down, how do I make money? And break it down into the steps and just try to make it as much of a plug and play simulation as you can. Think through, okay, if I'm going to get $10,000 of new revenue this month, what is my team literally doing to do that? Am I going to conferences? Am I investing in paid ads? All of that stuff. It's all got to flow through the revenue formula. Step two is kind of putting those two things together. You forecast your customer acquisition. Step 2 and 3 is putting those two things together to forecast your revenue streams. If all you do is the top line of this, if all you do is steps 1 through 3, it's going to help your business tremendously, because it's going to help you understand what are the levers that I have to actually grow this business, right? So that's kind of the top line, is just revenue. We've already said that that's the most important piece. So that'll get you off to a great start. Step 4 and 5 are all about costs. You guys have probably heard of have heard of direct expenses or cost of goods sold. These are the expenses that correlate directly with revenue. So like in the lemonade stand example, the classic lemonade stand example, what does it actually cost for me to produce lemonade? Well, it's the lemons, it's the sugar, it's the water, it's the cup, those types of things. So your direct costs are the things that you incur every time you sell a new customer. This is why people love SaaS so much, because once the software is built, what's my cost to add another person to that software? It's like almost zero. It's like maybe some hosting costs or something, negligible, right? So but you need to forecast exactly what those are so that you can understand how your costs scale as you get more and more customers on. Step 5 is all the other costs, the ones that don't directly scale with revenue, but they indirectly scale, because all costs indirectly scale with revenue. These can be things like hiring plan or my rent expense or travel and entertainment, whatever it is, all the other expenses that you incur when running your business. You have to handle all of those in step 5. This is where cash planning becomes very helpful, is that you can understand, well, what happens if I increase my expenses? What does that do to cash, right? These are the types of things they'll do. Step 6, that's where the balance sheet comes into play. That's where you're going to start forecasting your assets, liabilities, and equity. That's kind of going to get you more in the weeds to understand how the nuances of cash flow play out with the different things that the businesses own. So this will tell you, for example, if I took on $1 million in debt, what would that do to my expenses? What would that do to my cash, right? If I collected more of my accounts receivable, what would that do to my cash? All of these things. So you can do that in step 6. Step 7 is where you start to actually tie the statements together. That's where you're going to format your monthly income statement. And in step 8, you're going to format the monthly balance sheet statement of cash flows, and you tie them all together in step 9. All right. If you go to forecastr.co, that's forecastr.co, on that page, you're going to see a tab that says resources. If you click on that, you're going to see financial models, you're going to see investor pitch decks, all of those things. We have, I think, like at least 10 different financial model templates that are totally free to download. All we ask for is your email. You might get some marketing emails from us, but you'll get a completely free financial model that basically has done all of this for you. You just need to plug in the inputs and you should be good to go. Right. So I'd recommend you do that if you're interested in building a financial model, because doing all this from scratch is a lot. It can take a lot of time and it's fairly technical. Getting a template that's already been built is very, very helpful. And of course, if you're still lost in the template, then you can work with Forecastr. We would love to give everybody here a discount if that's interesting to you all. 20% off the first year. We're also going to throw in 10 free hours with an analyst just to get your model built. just that you can kind of start with something. So want to impart that on you guys. Here are the prices if you're interested: 5K a year, 10K a year. Take 20% off that. We also have monthly options as well. Oh, we got a 404 page. I'll try to find that for you here in a second. But with that, I think we got about 11 minutes left. So I did want to make sure that we
Looks like he hopped off for a second too. So hopefully it sounds like he'll be back. But yeah, Ola, for that, it's not just resources. So if anyone wants to access that, yeah, perfect. It's the startup dash resources. Hey, Logan. And I think you.
I tried to hit the stop share button. I accidentally hit the exit button. So I'm back, but I got about 11 minutes, 10 minutes now left for questions if you guys have some. And I'll try to find that page. I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, here we go. Templates.
No, and yeah, Logan, we got it. It was just the full startup resources. I'm like, yep.
Perfect. Cool. Well, good stuff. Any questions, comments, anything? The last 10
Yeah. So, and I've got one more. So I've got two other ones shared from the group, and I can always message you those separately in case anyone else has got something top of mind. But is there necessarily a formula? So, for example, you had said, right, we double, like in that cave, you double it from $30 a month to $60 a month, and then churn goes from 4% to 8%. Obviously, there's no way to kind of directly, assume that. Is there something where it's like, hey, within SaaS, within this price point, right, it kind of shows like industry averages or like what to expect when prices go up by X, right, off of a 20% close rate, then this happens? Or is it all kind of like anyone who uses the model just kind of needs to know that specific to their own number?
It's one of those things you kind of have to do that work to figure out what that behavior is like for yourself. I mean, it's really hard with things like churn rate and discount sensitivity because it varies so much by your market. And also, like, I mean, we can all probably relate to this. Like, there's a cutoff point where it doesn't behave linearly. So, like, for example, like iPhones, right? If I were to go buy an iPhone and it was like, I don't even know what they cost, but if it's like 500, I'd be like, okay, whatever, I'll still buy it. 600, okay, I'll still buy it. 700, crap, okay, I'll still. But if it's like $5,000, like no way, like I'm not buying this. So there's like these weird, like, not obvious that you kind of have to go and find cutoff points where everybody's just going to be like, dude, we're not buying that, not for that price. And so what I tell people, and this is one of the big values of FP&A, is like, I don't know what's going to happen to your churn rate if you increase prices by 20%. I don't know what's going to happen to it if you double it. I don't know what's going to happen to your conversion rates. But what I do know is that if you decided that you wanted to isolate one variable and test it, and you roll that out to a subset of your customers, you'll understand what those other metrics are. And the way that you really optimize your business using finance is that you run a bunch of those tests. I could say, I'm going to double my price. What is my churn rate now? What is my conversion rate now? Okay, let's plug those new numbers into the financial model and see what would happen if we just did this to everybody. Am I better or worse? Oh, I'm better. Okay, cool. Let's do that. And then you go to the next test and you kind of go over and over and over again. And, one of the things I tell founders is that for better or for worse, financial planning and analysis is one of those areas in business where the rich get richer, because once you make a lot of money, you can afford to go and hire a CFO and a bunch of analysts that like get in and do that. And that's how you got businesses that just grow like rocket ships that are incredibly profitable. It's like, well, yeah, they have teams of people constantly running tests, choreographing all of the different metrics and data, and they're just like optimizing the hell out of that business. So it's no wonder, but you have to get to a certain point before you can afford to do that type of stuff, which is frankly why Forecastr exists. Is our mission is to bring that same level of clarity way down the value chain, where even if you're really early, you can still do that stuff. And we think it's more democratic. It helps more businesses become successful.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And then we've got a question here from Toby that so asks, how would this work for like a B2C SaaS, maybe a consumer tech that isn't predicting or expecting any revenue for its first, 6 months of launch?
Yeah, it's finance becomes exponentially harder whenever you have very little data, especially like no data. So like the hardest companies to forecast for are B2B SaaS with like incredibly high contract values and very, very long sales cycles, because like you don't know when that deal is going to close, and you don't know if it's going to close, and whether or not that deal closes is going to make or break your year, that one deal. So how do you forecast if that one deal is going to close or not? It's like you can't really do that. Same deal with like pharmaceutical companies or like anything that's like more life sciences where they're not going to make any money for 5 years. They have to go through FDA approval, things like that. In all of those instances, I would say you're going to have to use your best judgment. You're going to have to try to theorize like what do I generally think is going to happen? What do I generally think is safe? Whenever you're really early and you're focused on making sure you don't run out of cash, which is what we should all be doing, my recommendation is just make sure that your assumptions, the assumptions that you use, you believe that you will comfortably beat those assumptions and revenue. I'll tell you this really quick story, which is whenever Forecastr raised our very first round of funding, we've raised about 15 million in total, but that first round was 750,000. And we just assumed that we didn't make any revenue with that money. And we planned for 24 months of runway with zero revenue. And we were like, well, we can definitely beat zero, right? I mean, there's no way that we go do worse than no revenue. And so we were just so comfortable. We were like, even if we don't make a dollar, we got 2 years to take a crack at this thing. And so that level of mindset, whenever you're really, really early and you're not generating revenue, just do some variant of that where it's like, okay, well, we can definitely beat this. So I've at least got the time that I need to see what revenue is going to be like and see what, how it's going to grow and how it's going to shape up over time. So it's a tricky question to answer. I'm not sure if I did it, but that's the best I got for you.
All right, Dirk, what do you got?
Thank you, Logan. I was curious about how many months do you typically suggest predicting out to before, unforeseen changes really dramatically, make the numbers just, it doesn't make sense to model out past a certain date. One example I think in my head is like, if we're spending a ton of money on brand recognition up front because it's just non-existent in our customers' minds, then, there's going to be a lot more marketing dollars for a lot less conversion. But later on, those same marketing dollars would probably lead to a higher conversion rate given time and effort. So that was just an example.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I'd say the general standard is 60 months. That's 5 years. The reason for that, and that's a lot of that is for fundraising. So it's like whenever you're pitching investors, because 5 years is theoretically enough time, especially if you're not a profitable startup, to flip over into profitability and hopefully see some longer term sustained economics. So, like, for example, for us, we might say, all right, in 5 years, in 2 years, we'll probably be profitable. Then we've got 3 years to see what like a normalized, stabilized gross margin would look like, a normalized, stabilized net margin could look like. But that's more of like aspirational, communicating the future, the vision of the company. Do I really know what's going to happen 5 years from now in my startup that we just started 5 years ago? No, but I can set goals and I can manage to those goals and I can use those to communicate to investors. So from like a vision standpoint, 5 years is the gold standard. But that's different than cash flow planning for me. For cash flow planning, it's really from now until your low point in cash if you're not profitable. Or if you are profitable, it's really for the next like 12 to 18 months, I would say. It's just like really focusing on that, just because it's like, generally, like I can tell you pretty closely what's going to happen next month and probably the month after that and the month after that. Once you get like 6 to 12 months out, it gets way fuzzier. And so I like to focus really, really maniacally on short-term targets so that I understand cash very clearly for like, from now until the low point. And then longer term, it's more about vision. It's more about team communication. It's more about, those types of things.
Really quick follow-up. After that 6 to 12 months where you're looking at the cash flow planning and you're looking more visionary, is it required to be looking at it continuously month to month, or at that point, should we start looking at it more year by year?
Yeah, I would say year by year is probably better once you get out a little bit, further. And I would say like also like again, if you're not profitable, really just focus on the period between now and you becoming profitable because that's the period that you really have to understand. You have to see what do we have to achieve in revenue to get profitable? What do our expenses look like before we get profitable? Once you're profitable, depending on what your cash balance looks like, those restrictions get relaxed, I would say a decent amount. And then it's more about optimization, vision, making sure you don't flip over into becoming unprofitable, those types of things. So yeah, I would say focus a lot whenever you're doing kind of internal FP&A, so cash planning and resource allocation. I would just focus on those shorter terms and then longer term, I would say is less important in those kind of like internal meetings.
Thank you.
Great question.
Awesome. Well, Logan, thanks so much. Everyone else, thank you for hopping. I know we're kind of right at the time here for the noon. So again, this was recorded. Logan, thanks. I think you're going to share your slide deck as well, but
That's right.
we'll have that. And then, yeah, if you want to get in touch with Logan, I think there's information's on that too. Otherwise, LinkedIn or any other best way to get in touch.
Yep. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, my email, if you guys want to email me, is Logan, Logan, at forecastr.co. So feel free to send me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn. All of that stuff's great.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, Logan. Thanks, everyone. And excited to keep the conversation going.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, Logan. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.